Assalamualaikum and greetings. My name is Muhammad Syarif Putra bin Jaafar and my supervisor is Dr. Alami bin Muhammad Sultan, and I'll be presenting my final year project 2 which by the title of the study of Industrial Revolution 4.0 Readiness at Melaka Halal. Without wasting time, I'm going to start with the problem statement. First, there is no study on the correlation of IR 4.0 dimension significance. Second, what are the critical factors of implementing IR 4.0 and relationship between the readiness dimension with social background of companies in Melaka Al-Hab. Third is no study has been conducted to assess IR 4.0 readiness level in Melaka Al-Hab. So all of this shows the lack of exposure of IR 4.0 despite being said with Yong Man Lin, despite us a strong manufacturing economies in Asia, manufacturers in Malaysia are the beginners who are lack of proper understanding of the concept and practices of IR 4.0. Next is objective. First, to analyze the correlation of IR 4.0 dimension through factor analysis. Second, to investigate the critical factor of drivers and barriers to relation with IR 4.0 dimension and social background in Melaka Al-Hab. Third is to measure and assess the readiness level of Industrial Revolution 4.0 at Melaka Al-Hab. Next, I'm going to briefly explain about the Melaka Al-Hab. So Melaka Hub was a center for halal food products in the provision of manufacturing infrastructure, which established from 2006 and consists of 86 active factories and located at Serkam, Melaka. Now I'm going to explain the flowchart of my project. So starting with problem statement and define objective and scope. Next is literature review. Next is meta-analysis of tool of Industrial Revolution 4.0 readiness, which I must find a tool to measure, to assess measure of my project. And next is adapted questionnaire based on pulse method and do pilot study on the questionnaire such as sampling and population and reliability analysis. Then goes to questionnaire validation. If it's not valid, then we go back to pilot study of sampling, population and reliability analysis. If yes, we go straight ahead to conduct survey execution, then integrated data collection, then analysis where mostly using SPSS software to find factor correlation, person, communities, and others. Next, readiness score calculation to assess level, and next is accumulate readiness result, and that's it. So to simplify the flowchart, here's the method I use to achieve the objectives. For objective 1, the method is the SPS. I'm using SPS software analysis, finding mean and standard deviation to find correlation coefficient. As for objective 2, we conducting conditional survey analysis to determine significance of dimension in relation to demographic data, which is the social background. The one, the objective method by scoring method using IR 4.0 calculation formula and classify the readiness level. Now I'm going to explain on the methodology of how I found a tool to assess the readiness level. So I made a meta-analysis table such as shown in table 1, where I list all the tools that have been developed and here's the criteria on the tool I set. And the second one is where I found a journal or report that have the finding or the result of the assessment tool and what method used to use the assessment tool. And that is how I find the tool I'm using right now. Now I'm going to explain the best assessment tool that I got from the method, which is the impulse method. So the impulse method is evaluation tool used to analyze and determine the level of company readiness of IR 4.0 using the survey questionnaire, which is developed by H. Blau et al. From 2015, where combines the question of all pillars of IR 4.0 such as cloud computing, augmented reality, IoT, and others into element of dimension. These are the 6 dimensions that concludes all the pillars of IR 4.0. The question survey implement 5 Likert scale as the respondents agreement with the practices listed. Improve the questionnaire with critical factors question of driver and barriers of IR 4.0 implementation. And here is the questionnaire content, which consists of 3 sections. Section A is demographic background of companies such as industry type, size of company, type of business entity, gender, which is the social background of the company. So section B is assessment scheme of dimension, where all the 6 dimensions I mentioned before and with its description. Section C is the critical factor of IR 4.0 on driver and barriers. So section B and C is only answer by 5 Likert scale form. For pilot study sampling and population, I use Craigie and Morgan tables to simplify the process of determining the sample size of a finite population. Here are the tables. Since Melaka Halal have 86 factories, so the population is 85 and the sample I need is 70. But I only get 56 samples, which is 80% of the sample I needed, so which is good. So next is the reliability analysis, where I use alpha scrum-bug to measure of internal consistency. Here's the calculation I get, 0.967. The closer the value to the value 1, it is good. So this value is good. Next is survey execution. Here's a few pictures of survey execution I made. Getting into my result and discussion, here's my demographic data, which is the social background of the company, which is industry type of business entities, size of company, and gender. So here's the result of average respondents data on each dimension. So based on data from each dimension, we can see that most of company in Melaka Hub is not ready for the IR 4.0. Now we get into the result for factor analysis. Using SPSS software, here is the mean and standard deviation for each dimension, which is used for descriptive analysis. Now we can find the correlation of each dimension by dimension. So this table of data shows that the study of the relationship of dimension by each dimension. So as you can see, the significance is the value of each significance is below than 0.050, which is significant. So all of the correlation of each dimension is significant. Now is the result for the KMO and Bartlett's test. This test shows us that the data that we get, is it worth or suitable for to be run on factor analysis. So the value must be more than 0.6. Since we got 0.810, so it is worth to run for factor analysis. Therefore, factor analysis is appropriate. For communalities, it shows the dimension extraction to get perform the eigenvalue to use on the total variance table. Here's the result for the total variance, where it shows the extraction on each component. So based on initial eigenvalues, we can plot on the screen plot graph relation to the component number, where it shows the number of relevant component to be considered in the principal component analysis. So from the script plot, we can say that one component is enough to say the component is relevant. So hence, all of the factor analysis achieve the objective one. And now we get into the result of the average respondents' opinion for the critical factor of IR 4.0, which are the barriers and the drivers of IR 4.0. In the bracket shows that the main point of the question of barriers. From barrier 7 to 9, you can still see that most respondents agree with the barriers. So here's the total of 10 barriers being asked, where majority of the respondents agree with the barriers of IR 4.0. And here is the result for the average respondent's opinion for the critical factor of the other half, which is the drivers of IR 4.0. So for drivers of market growth, productivity, and collaboration, the data shows that respondents is mostly agree with the drivers. For drivers of flexibility and agility, opportunities, and performance, majority of respondents also agree with the drivers. And lastly, for the drivers profitability, most majority of the respondents says that they agree with the drivers. So these are the results for the significant relationship between dimension and social background. So using SPSS software, we can see that the decision of the dimension relationship with the gender does not significant. It means that gender of male and female does not relationship with the dimension of IR 4.0. Next is dimension relationship with the type of business entities. the decision is not significant to each other too. Next is the dimension relation to the size of company, where it shows the decision is not significant to all dimensions. So the size of company does not significant or relation with the dimension of I 4.0. Next is dimension relation to the industry type. Decisions says that no significance. That means that industry type does not significant or relation to the dimension of IR 4.0. So here's the result for the significant relationship between dimension and critical factor. So I only take some of the critical factor to analyze to manage the time limit of the slide. So for barriers information, it shows that dimension employees are significant to the barriers of information. While for barriers of financial, it shows that dimension of smart factories, smart products, smart operation and data driven and services are significant or relation to the barriers of financial. Hence, these achieve the objectives too. So here's the formula to calculate the readiness score and the readiness level with its description. This calculation shows the overall IR 4.0 readiness score of Melaka Halal which is 29.89 and put on the level of newcomer and also achieving objective 3. Here are the result of wet graph of readiness percentage on each dimension readiness. So as for the conclusion, the correlation between the IR 4.0 dimension are significant to other dimension. Next, social background does not affect the significance of IR 4.0 dimension while critical factor does affect the IR 4.0 dimension. The result of readiness degree of Melaka Al-Hab is at newcomer level of score of 29.89. And here are the suggestion, which is Melaka Al-Hab can consider the possible challenge from the lack of aspect in dimension, also creating initiative of planning and strategies to implement IR 4.0 and also make annual IR 4.0 assessment on companies for record update.